We're ready to pick up with subpoint B. So capital B says, this malfunction on the part of the fallen angels is most likely the answer to why demons must resort. Hey, it came back. To demon possession or demon influence instead of assuming human form when they want to directly influence society, etc. Got talking during the break, didn't get myself any coffee. Continuing the point, logically, one can conclude that after the Genesis 6 revolt, God took away the ability of all fallen angels to ever again assume human form. Now, we know that this is associated with fallen angels, but not elect angels, because elect angels do assume human form. We have the situation where Joshua was walking through, and all of a sudden, an angel appeared in front of him. And so the angel appeared in front of him, in a human form, if you will. He went down to worship the angel, and the angel said, "Don't worship me. You only worship God." So the idea is that that elect angels probably can assume human form, but they won't do anything like happened in the revolt. Okay. Subpoint 5. Then we have the first action in a two-part action by God regarding these angels. This first part is that he, quote, consigned them to Tartarus, period, end quote. This represents the sentencing phase. So in other words, this is the fact that they're sentenced and they're consigned or earmarked for Tartarus. It's like when a judge, in the sentencing phase, first of all, you have the conviction. They're found guilty. Well, these guys were found guilty, right? And then they have a sentencing phase, and they come before the judge, and the judge says, okay, you're going to spend, the next 6 years in jail, or in this case, you're going to spend eternity being confined. That's the sentencing phase. The individual, then has to go and actually start executing that sentence, right? They've got to now put them on the bus and take them to prison, right? In the human realm, or they, say, well, you're sentenced to 20 years, but because you've been in this court for 25 minutes, we're going to continue. We're going to consider it, sentence complete, and we're going to let you out. You showed good behavior in the court, so you get to go out. But anyway, the idea is you have two phases. You have first the sentencing, and then you have the actual execution of the sentence. So this first phase, consign them to Tartarus, represents the sentencing phase. Point 6. Next, we have the second part, or that of carrying out the sentence. Colon. Quote, he delivered them, period, end quote. So once they've been sentenced, they then have to start serving the sentence. So they are delivered to Tartarus. I kind of like the idea of chains, although it's not what's there, right? But I kind of like that because it gives you that picture that we've all seen on TV, right, where the guys are in the bus and they've got they've got their hands and legs in shackles and everything, and they're delivered to the prison, right? In the shackles. One of the most dramatic scenes like that I ever saw, if you've ever seen the Green Mile, right, is when the van pulls off front of the prison, right, and Michael, whatever his name was, the actor that passed away, right, he's the big black guy that that they've captured, and he goes to get out of the van, right, and they show the steps of the van, and they show his feet come down, and the whole van goes roll and sinks, as he gets down in the chain, and he's in the chains, and he goes into the prison, right, but that's not what we have here. Delivered to darkness. Okay, point 7. Peter gives us the emphatic phrase, comma, quote, to pits of darkness, slant gloom, period, end quote, and all that's underlined. Subpoint A. This phrase has, quote, textual criticism, end quote, related to it. In the 26th edition of the Nestle-Aland, and you can just do NA, there's the name of 2 guys that edited it. In the 26th edition of the Nestle-Aland Greek New Testament, comma, which is the one I predominantly use, comma, and I'm not alone. A lot of Bible teachers use that. There's been a resurgence in what they call the majority text, but I won't get into all of that. But the majority text is a little bit different than this is what's called the Alexandrian text. They have the Alexandrian text and the Byzantine text, and the Byzantine text is what's called, or text type is what's called the majority text. But that's a whole class, like semester. Okay, anyway, in the 26th edition of the Nestle-Aland edition of the Greek New Testament, which is the one that I predominantly use, it has the word, quote, Seira, S-E-I-R-A, comma, end quote. Which means, quote, rope or chain, period, end quote. Several other versions, including the Byzantine, I'll spell Byzantine for you, B-Y-Z-A-N-T-I-N-E, text type. And the Byzantine text type is what led to Textus Receptus, which is what is used in the King James. Okay, several other versions, including the Byzantine text type, also have this word in it. And so if you have a King James version, what you'll find is it says that he delivered them into chains of darkness. The reason they have the word chains there is because the Textus Receptus, which is part of the Byzantine text type, and by text type, what I mean is it's a whole bunch of manuscripts, so it's not just a text. It's what's called technically a text type. Okay, it also has that word Seira in it. Okay. However, continuing the point, however, several other text types such as the quote Westcott, W-S-T-C-O-T-T hyphen Hort, H-O-R-T, end quote, and the quote Tischendorf, T-I-S-C-H-E-N-D-O-R-F, end quote, have Seiros, S-E-I-R-O-S, which means pit. See, since we don't have the original hand, okay, of the letter, we don't have what Peter wrote. We just have copies of it. There are different editors, different collectors, if you will, that take various manuscripts and put them together into their version of the New Testament, right? And so Westcott Hort did one, and they went through it, and then it's not just random. They do a very good theological study and everything, okay, and they do that. And then Tischendorf did one, and Nestle-Aland has edited one, and there's a thing called the majority text, which is by that was confirmed by a guy called Robinson. There's a Robinson Pierpont text type. So there's a whole bunch of these slightly different versions. Now the interesting thing is they're all about 99.9% the same. There's just that 0.1% where there's differences, and the differences don't really amount to a lot of difference from a theological standpoint. But I want to make sure that we have as close to the original as we can. So like I said, I went through the different versions and looked at the apparatus that shows you which manuscripts and papyri were included in each version of these New Testament translations. And the ones that have the oldest manuscripts are the ones that I tend to favor, because I believe the closer it is to the original in a time frame is probably the same as the closer it is to to the actual written word by the author. Okay, so finishing this thing, we had Tischendorf has Seiros, which means pit. Having done an exhaustive study, I am convinced that the more correct translation is Seiros, or pits. Subpoint B. Next, we have the word Zophos, and that's D-Z-O-P-H-O-S. Which means darkness or thick gloom. This is a palpable darkness slant gloom. Or one that can actually be felt, semicolon. It comes to mean the darkness of, quote, the underworld, period, end quote. So that's what the word is used for in non-biblical literature. You know, when you look at the Greek poets and things, they use that word when they're talking about, you know, about Hades and the underworld. Now, I don't know if you've ever experienced a complete darkness. When the kids were young, we took them out. Like I said, I've told you the story before, but we took them out to the Goldfield, you know, mining town out there, and they supposedly take you down in a mine. Which they don't really do. They just take you down a little bit, you know, in an elevator, but they take you underground a little bit, right? And they explain to you what the miners did and how they worked with their lamps and everything else. But then they also mentioned that when they would eat, they would shut their lamps off because they didn't want to burn all of the fuel that they had in their headlamp. Right. And so they would shut their lights off until they were done eating because they could feel around for their food and eat it. But they wanted to show us what complete darkness was. And so they shut the lights off. And when you're down underground, there's not like a little crack of light like when you put your shutters in your bedroom, right? I mean, I have a bedroom in my room, and I have a bedroom in my house that if you close the shutters, it gets pretty dark, right? But you still get a little bit of light, street lights. Well, this was black, black, black. I mean, you could not see anything. And there's a little bit of a feeling to it that's just a weird, eerie, creepy feeling because you can't see anything. You have no idea if anything's coming at you or crawling on you or anything, right? You know, I mean, it's a palpable darkness, and that's what this word means. Okay, it's that kind of darkness. Subpoint C. This phrase is underlined to emphasize the extreme punishment that these creatures are experiencing. I can't remember how to spell ooh. It's supposed to make you go, ooh, yuck. At 2:00 last night, I say I have ow now instead of ooh, but you're supposed to go, ooh, yuck. It's even worse when you stop and think about it, that angels are, quote, creatures of light, right? So we are physical mortals, obviously, and being in darkness like that and feeling it, you can imagine what it's like if you're a creature of light and you're stuck in a place where it's the absolute antithesis of your entire being. See, so for them, you go, well, darkness can't be any kind of punishment. I could be in the dark. That's no big deal, right? Eventually your eyes adjust to it. Well, it doesn't, but it's not that big a deal. Well, if you're a creature of light, it's the exact opposite of what you're made out of, right? So it's taking away essentially your existence, if you will. Okay. So that's why it's emphasized. It's true punishment. Subpoint 8. And this is wrong. I knew I made a mistake. In first class, I was going up. Final judgment is not the judgment seat of Christ. It's the great white throne judgment. Judgment seat of Christ is what we go through. Peter then gives us A glimpse of eschatology. And eschatology is spelled ESCHATOLOGY, eschatology, or the quote, end times, period, end quote. That's what everybody wants to know about. Everybody wants to really go into eschatology, and they want to, devote their whole life to the book of Revelation instead of devoting their life to the real truth, the rest of the truth of the Word of God. So Peter gives us a glimpse of eschatology or the end times. His last phrase, quote, keeping them secure for judgment, end quote, means that they are being held until the time at which they will experience their final judgment. And of course, this is after, quote, the final judgment, end quote, or the great white throne judgment. When the, quote, devil and his angels, end quote, will be cast into the lake of fire. Matthew 25:41. Compared with Revelation 20:10 and 14. So what we have to understand is that the phrase keeping them secure for judgment doesn't mean that they're in their final judgment and therefore being held secure, which, English is a little bit ambiguous. You could understand keeping them secure for judgment could mean that they're being held secure and that is their judgment. But the idea is that's not that. It means that he's holding them there temporarily. This is like the county holding cell until they can move them to the state penitentiary. Okay, so they're currently in a holding cell and they're going to eventually be moved into the lake of fire. Matthew 25:41 compared to Revelation 20:10 and 14. Continue the point. This phrase, keeping them secure for judgment, is what I'm talking about now. This phrase tells us that these angels are, quote, out of the game, end quote, and are no longer part of phase 2 of the angelic conflict, or no longer operational in time. Remember, phase 2 is time. God will hold them locked up until the end of time. period. We can have confidence that they will never again affect mankind. And since we're talking about angels and elect angels and fallen angels and Hades and everything else, we're going to go into, I'm going to take us into a study of angel and Hades. It's going to be pretty quick because it's information that we already know. So it's just going to be a review. So I'm not going to go into the doctrine of angels or the doctrine of the angelic conflict. If I did that, it would take us for several months. And I think we know the angelic conflict, we know angels enough. But I'm going to give it to us here so that if there are those who are listening, or if you have forgotten a couple different things, we can at least hit the high points and we can go about the structure of Hades and get a refresher of what's the difference between Tartarus and torments and the abyss and the gates of hell and things like that. Okay, so we'll be going into that. And I don't want to, we only have 5 minutes left, so I'm going to give us actually the 5 minutes to sing a song so that we'll end on time. Okay, so that's where we'll pick it up next week.